People have things to say, but they're afraid. When we don't speak up, we're actually not doing ourselves or the company or the project or the product or our peers any justice, because by adding your voice to that conversation, usually it needs to go in a new direction. First off, it's just having the courage and the confidence to speak up. And I think that's probably, with some of the folks that I see, that's the hardest part about it.
I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to bother them. I'm sure they know more than I know. All sorts of other self-justification for not speaking up.
If team members don't feel like they're being supported, we're going to have a lot of problems here, because then they're not going to actually want to work for you as the leader. As a leader, how do you react to people who do speak up? Am I open? Do I want to hear the conversation? Have I given the person enough space and room to speak? And if you get that opportunity to be in a room with those senior leaders, take it. But take it from a very mindful, meaningful conversation, as opposed to just like, I have to have a voice because I'm here.
So what do we do to kind of boost that courage or confidence that we're going to not to die, figuratively, in the process of speaking up?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I think a lot of it is
there is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. Now, I want you to imagine that you are charged with a challenge and you know that there are obstacles and that they're not being addressed. So how do you as a leader make sure that people are speaking out to you? And how do you as an individual get the courage, the skills to speak out to your leaders without risking everything about your reputation and your progress and your standing? So both of those are critically important. And we always say, speak out, speak out, speak out, but we often don't talk about how. So it's equally applicable to your peers. How do you really get your peers to align, to say the truth, to hear each other? And then that's the only source for really, truly collaborating. None of it's easy, but I'm going to tell you none of it is impossible either. So today we're going to be focusing on advice and wisdom from people who've been in the trenches and the tactics that you can use that will make a difference. So my guest is Betsy Kauffman. She's a globally recognized executive leadership coach and organizational agility consultant with over 25 years of experience transforming Fortune 500 leadership teams into high-performing, aligned powerhouses. And her signature leadership alignment lab really blends the coaching, some proprietary 360 feedback, and strategic offsites to help really C-suite executives turn that vision into more of a reality. And what we're talking about today is speaking up. So Betsy, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Wanda. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk about all
So am I.
We have a lot of good topics.
We have a lot of good topics. I want to start with, I know you're working on a book, so the book is coming. Everybody stay tuned.
Yes.
But more importantly, it's your TED Talk that I just absolutely loved, and it's about speaking up. So let's take the case of a person who has an opinion or a view about why a project, an execution, is not going to go as planned, or any other case you want to set me up, and they're afraid to speak out about it. So tell me, use your own example, but tell me what you think is happening.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a little bit about the background of why the TED Talk came to be. I was in a organization and I was coaching a group of leaders. It was a cross-functional group of folks. So business, technology, kind of your classic product team type of thing. And I was having one-on-one conversations with several of these leaders, and they were just saying, gosh, I wish I really want to say something, but I'm just not comfortable doing that. And I hear that all the time. And so I actually got to a point where I was like, okay, I feel like there's something there. So I submitted for the TED Talk, and we got picked on the very last day, which was super kind of cool that they came in and said, hey, here's your last day of submission. And they said, yeah, let's do this. But what I see happening is that people have things to say, but they're afraid. They're afraid of either the repercussion. They're afraid it's going to, the meeting will extend on for another hour. They're afraid of all the different things that could possibly happen. And when we don't speak up, we're actually not doing ourselves or the company or the project or the product or our peers any justice, because you typically have something to say. And by adding your voice to that conversation, usually it needs to go in a new direction because there's something happening. So if I were to give another example, I'm actually working with a woman right now, and we're going to go in and work with a team. And she said to me in a one-on-one, she's like, I don't agree that we should be working with this team. I think we have other teams that need more help than this one. And I said to her, well, why don't you say something? Why don't you speak up when we're in our conversation? She's like, yeah, I will. So we were in our conversation. She didn't speak up. She didn't say anything. And so, I kind of mentioned, like, do we still think this is the right team to be working on? And it was kind of like some rumblings, but nobody wanted to make the waves to kind of pause or stop the project in order to say, let's really talk through this. Just because I think they were at a point, either they were exhausted or they just wanted the meeting, they wanted to move forward, whatever the conversation was.
I see this when I do 360 feedback and I know you do this as well, but I do 360 feedback for a leader, and it's the team underneath them that one of the kind of consistent pieces of feedback is I want my leader to push back more.
Yeah.
Which is really speak up to your boss and say, this is too much. This is impossible. We can't do it without the resources. Right. Are you sure we're going in the right direction? The kind of classic speak up and push back. And people will say back to me, yeah, but they don't understand.
Yeah.
And yes, that's true.
Right. You yeah. I mean, this is why we have these conversations, because if team members don't feel like they're being supported, we're going to have a lot of problems here, because then they're not going to actually want to work for you as the leader, because they're going to feel like you're never going to go to bat for them. And that's, it's the old adage, like, people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. I mean, that's typically what happens, is because they don't feel they're being supported, or they don't feel like the boss understands the work, or whatever that leader is in that case.
Or even to pushing back on the team, even to say, look, I know you want X, Y, and Z, and I understand why, and here's why we're not going to do. So it's either pushing up, pushing down, or pushing out. And I don't mean pushing down as in shoving down. I mean speaking so that people understand why you're making a decision that you're making. But it's everywhere. And like you started with the story of when you tee up the example for this woman to say, I think we're working with the wrong team. Yeah. Like everything, roll out the red carpet.
Yeah.
And still nobody says anything.
That cracked, swing it open, let's go with it.
Yeah, like what did they think what is ever going to go wrong? I mean, it's really shocking to me how much people silence themselves.
I believe it is too. And I think it's because they're either a fear of bringing up the elephant in the room, the known of what's going on, or they don't want to cause a ripple. They don't want to actually pause the work, have the hard conversations, make sure we're working on the right stuff at the right time. And so, that becomes and I really do think in this world right now, everybody's fatigued. They're tired. They're like, okay, where am I going to, which battle am I going to do at this point in time? Right. And so they pick which battle they're going to go after. And sometimes they just don't think it's worth it. And they're like, well, let's just see how it goes. And, but then they'll come back and say, see, I told you so. And you're like, no, but you told me, but you didn't tell your peers or the team members or your leaders, right? Really what you thought, what we needed to do. So, yeah.
Well, and fair, you can't speak up about every single little issue. You do have to choose the ones to speak up, and you do have to be thoughtful about how you're going to speak up. So let's turn to that. How do you do this and still keep your job and also keep your standing and reputation?
Yeah. So I'm going to just do the 4 tips that, we do on the TED Talk. And the first one is courage or confidence. So first off, it's just having the courage and the confidence to speak up, right? So being like, okay, I do have something to say here. I want to say it, right? And I think that's probably with some of the folks that I see, that's the hardest part about it, is actually mustering up the courage to say what they want to say.
Okay.
The second one goes to your point, is like, do you really have something important to say, or are you just talking, right? So understand, like, what is the outcome that you want to achieve by speaking up, and have a goal for it. The third one is facts. So people need factual data. They need factual information as to what is going on. It can't be so emotional. I mean, it's okay to have emotions, but it can't be so emotional. Like, I just don't like this team. I don't like this leader. I just don't think they're, whatever. Like, tell us why. What's going on? Well, they're brand new. They're potentially they're all contractors. Potentially we don't have enough information, or we don't have nobody's dedicated, or whatever it is. Make sure you have the data behind your reasoning, and then come with a solution. So more times than not, I see folks that are like, this is the problem. They put it out there, but there's never a solution. And as we know, leaders like solutions. They don't just always want all kinds of problems dumped in their laps. They want folks to say, okay, here's what I'm seeing. This is why it's important for us to talk about it. Here's the data behind it. And here are some other alternatives that we could possibly explore. as part of, why we need to go down this path. So I think, if we kind of use those 4 things, that will help folks to speak up, to say what they want to say, and also to have a good conversation when it's important. So again, to your point, you don't always have to talk up, but let's find the right things that are important, things that we want to focus on.
All right, so courage or confidence. I have to have an important goal or important outcome that matters, that is worthwhile. I need some facts, and I need a solution, at least a suggestion. All right, now I want to tackle the one on facts for just a minute, and then I'm going to come back with a modeling, and you can coach me on it.
Oh,
but
God. Okay.
On the facts, I believe that most of the time we make decisions based on the emotion. How do I feel about it? And then we justify it with the facts. So I think facts are important, but I also think it's important to name emotions. How do you... And now, I can't go hysterical in the middle of a meeting speaking up. That's not going to work very well.
Right.
Or have a temper tantrum or any variation on that theme. But I think there's power in naming the emotion. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. Like I said, you can't put your emotions completely aside, right? And so you do need to have, there's something probably happening in your gut that's telling you like, okay, this isn't the right thing, or I need to speak up, or I need to say something. So it's okay to have that emotion. But I also think, again, the facts behind it are important as well. If you want to be respected in what you're saying, because then they're not, it's like, oh, the sky is falling. Oh, here she comes again. Or he comes again. Here's the emotional one, right? So I think it's okay to bring emotion to work, but also to bring that, facts to your point.
Okay. All right. So let's take your case that you started with, and let's suppose for a moment that I'm the person who believes that we're not using you against the right team, that we have other teams with more issues. All right. And I can imagine saying something like the following. Then I want you to coach me on how to do it differently. It's like, I know it's important for us to get the highest return out of Betsy's time. Mm-hmm. That will drive our performance in the best possible way. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm worried that we put our efforts in the right place.
Right.
I know we have 3 teams that are struggling. So could we pause and evaluate which is the right team to start with?
Yeah, I actually think that's a great start. Honestly, I think it's a really, really good start. And then what team would you recommend and why? Right? That's where I would probably go to if I were on the call and say, okay, yeah, or tell me what your concern is about the one team that we've selected. Is it for whatever reason? And I think, in this example, this team actually is working pretty well together. They're not, don't have a lot of challenges and issues. And so they're like, wow, we're going to spend a nice chunk of money with this consultant to help us when this is probably the team doesn't need it the most, right? So I would say, tell me why you think this team is not the most challenging one, or the one you think needs to get focused, and which ones do you recommend and why? And after that, let the conversation kind of
take its own turn.
Where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can also see in that conversation, you can also say, look, I think there are 3 teams that we can consider. I see the pros for going with the current team. They're excited, they're interested, they're willing to do it. We can take them to a better level. But I also see the cons in that there's another team over here that I think needs more help. Okay, and I guess that depends upon whether the leader of that other team is sitting in the room and willing to say, you're right, I do, or no, we don't need any help at all.
Well, and the intricacies of this situation per se is there's several leaders that are actually represented on the team, right? So we have a business person, we have a technology person, we have an operations person, we have a project person. And so we've got, kind of 4 horsemen that have to weigh in on, is this the right team or not? And so everybody really does have to have a conversation, have a say, and say, okay, maybe the business says, yes, this is the right team, and technology may say, no, it's not. And so that's where we need to come together and bring it up, because if one group within that 4 quadrant says no, and it doesn't go well for whatever reason, they're like, I told you so. I'm going to raise my hand, right? And that's what we're trying to avoid. So that's why we want to get those voices out there early, so that we can all sit and say, okay, yep, this is the decision we came to, and this is where we're going with it.
All right. So if I'm speaking up, I want to reiterate why this is important for all of us, the goal, the outcome we're all striving for. So that common intention.
Yeah.
I can name the emotion. I'm worried. I'm anxious. I'm concerned. I'm afraid, whatever. I'm excited. But I need to back that up with facts. So it's not just we have 3 teams. I need to name 3 teams. I need to say a little bit more about the state of each of the 3 teams, just a tiny bit more, so that people know what I'm thinking. And then I need a solution. And the solution is not, we should stop and think about it. The solution, an ideal solution, is to say, I'd like us to consider starting with this other team because 1, 2, 3.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Now that left the most important question out, which is the courage, because that's the hardest part. So what do we do to kind of boost that courage or confidence that we're going to not to die figuratively in the process of speaking up?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I think a lot of it is really an intrinsic, confidence in yourself, right? What I have to say is important and it needs to be said because, again, it is coming from a place of true, positive intention. It's not just coming for me to move my agenda forward. I mean, it might be. We know we have leaders. We've all worked with leaders like that, right? Who have their own agenda. But from a courage standpoint, people want to hear what you have to say, as long as you say it with those other 3 tips along. But I think it becomes a having confidence in yourself that you do add meaning to the conversation and that you're in the meeting for a reason, right? People want to hear from you, and they want you to talk, and they want to understand what your standpoint is and where you want to, where we're going with this conversation or with this project or with whatever it is that we're working on.
I'm going to use the word junior. I don't mean they're junior, but they're junior relative to the senior leaders that I'm speaking about. So junior talent, maybe 2, sometimes 3 steps below a C-suite executive. Say, I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to bother them. I'm sure they know more than I know. All sorts of other self-justification for not speaking up. When I say that to the senior executives, to the C-suite, they give me the polar opposite view. They say there's nothing more important than for me to hear from our strongest talent. This person is in the room, they have a say because they are strong talent. I would not have them there otherwise.
Yeah.
They matter to me. Their opinion matters to me. They're closer to it than I am. I want to know.
Right.
And it's that sense of what else would I be spending my time on if I'm not listening to people like this? I mean, like these individuals.
Yeah.
And so you're there for a reason and you have to execute that reason.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I love leaders that actually believe that and they want those folks in the room, right? They want to hear from the folks that are, I don't want to say in the trenches, but I'm going to say in the trenches because they are closer to the work and they want to hear what's going on. They also want them to bring opinions and bring recommendations and bring solutions. And if you get that opportunity to be in a room with those senior leaders, take it, right? But take it from a very mindful, meaningful conversation as opposed to just like, I have to have a voice because I'm here. Have a voice because you actually have something important to say and you take a stance in who you are.
Yeah.
Your career will go much further that way and
That's
people
right.
will recognize you, right? They'll say, oh, I love that person because they do speak up and they do tell us what's happening and they are a value member of our team. So let's continue to bring them to the table and have them part of the conversation.
There have been 2 senior leaders on the podcast in the last several years who've given very explicit stories about a younger person making a massive effort to get in touch with them with an idea or a concern or a whatever. And the impact at the end of the day was, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Because I know leaders who turn themselves inside out to try to figure out what is really thinking and happening and mood and concerns down the chain.
Yeah.
Because they don't hear it and they're desperate to hear it. They can't get the decisions right if they don't hear that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's funny, as I've been reflecting on my career, I've been doing a lot of work on that recently. That's actually, I think, how I became who I am, is that as I was, doing project management and program management and kind of, in the trenches, working with the teams, I wasn't afraid to speak up. And so I started to really, and speak up from a place of being positive and also trying to look for solutions and not just being this person that always had to talk. And I think that's what's helped me to become this person that can now sit at the table with the C-suite, to have the conversations, to work with executives, because I was able to start to have those conversations early on in my career. And when I'm in a room of junior, we'll just use the quotation marks, right? Junior folks. And I always can feel the ones like, oh, you're going to be really great. You're going to be successful because you're speaking up. You've got good things to say. You are engaged in the work and in the conversation. And so I think, depending on whoever's listening to this podcast, I think, if you are a junior member of a team, speak up, start to have a voice, and have a say, you'll go much further than if you just kind of like wilt into the background and don't want to be a part of the conversation.
Betsy, this reminds me of an old conversation at the very beginning of this podcast. So go back to some of the original episodes. Ray Thompson, who's a communications specialist, says, and I've quoted him so many times, C-suite executives want to know, what's your point? Get to it quickly. Don't waffle around.
Yes.
2, why are you sure? Expect me to test it. I'm going to ask questions. Be ready for that.
I love
and
that.
then 3, what do you want from me? And that's your solution. In some ways, it's a different version of what you just said.
Yes.
What's the importance of the outcome? What are the facts? And what's your solution?
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
I love that last one. What do you want from me? Because I think a lot of leaders don't know, right? If you think about it, they've got so many things coming at them, and they're dealing with just all kinds of different things between, board members or, peers, direct reports. So make sure you do know what you want from them, right? What is it? Why are you talking? Like, why are you bringing something up? Not why you're talking to them, but why are you bringing something up, and how can they help you regarding whatever the situation is? Help them to help you.
Yeah. I would also add that there is a timing for when to like if the decision has already been made and we're way into execution mode, it's a little harder. That doesn't mean never. It just means being more thoughtful about your facts and about what's going on or what your solution is. And you can't do this as a venting session.
Right. Exactly.
There's place for venting. This is not it. Okay, Betsy, let's turn the tables. So courage, importance of the outcome, some facts, okay to name the emotion, and a solution. What do you want to do, or what do you want the other person to do as a result? Let's say now that I'm leading a team.
Okay.
What can I do to make sure that my team is speaking up and telling me what's really going on?
Yeah. So it's interesting. First off, if they're not speaking up, that's a huge sign for you. There's something going on, right? But I always want to make sure when I work with leaders, it's calling on every person in the room, right? Making sure that we have all kinds of different dynamics and personalities, and some folks are more louder and gregarious. The other ones could be shyer, more of an introvert. Give everybody a space and a place to talk up, call on them, ask their opinion, see what's going on. So that's obviously first, and that's probably kind of like, the basic 101 of communication. But if they're not speaking up, you might want to, in a one-on-one, ask them why. I value your opinion. I would love to hear more of what you have to say. Usually the ones that are quiet actually are probably the most impactful, right? Within a team. I've found that very, very much so with a lot of the work that I do. And it could be that they don't feel comfortable. There could be a team member that dominates them. It could be that they don't think that the leader, actually values their opinion or wants to hear what they have to say. So I think there's some work to be done on both within a group setting and within a one-on-one setting. And as a leader, how do you react to people who do speak up? So again, kind of looking internally to say, okay, do I really want to hear from everybody? Do I really want even the introverts and even the extroverts and everybody to have a place? Or am I going to respond and, not be happy or be, or freak out or whatever is going on in that situation? So it's almost like doing a 360 on yourself to say, okay, am I open? Do I want to hear the conversation? Have I given the person enough space and room to speak? And, have they actually given me some feedback on what's going well and what's not going well? So I think those are kind of the few things that I would say as a leader, what you need to do. And then going back to my original point, and is if people are not speaking up, really figure out what's happening. I'm working with a group of leaders right now, and we do these offsites, and they're great and they're really rich. And then when they come back to the office, they never hear from them. Like, how was it? Did you like it? Was it exciting? And they're like, and I'm like, that's actually concerning. So we probably need to figure out, either they're so busy that they don't we've left everything that we learned or we did together, or something happened that they don't feel as warm and fuzzy as we all do when we left the room. So why are they not speaking up? Why are they not giving us feedback on that offsite during that time?
Right. Or following up on that one. I remember your thing about, how you react when someone speaks up. I remember talking to a very senior leader who's an American, but working in Japan, and living in Japan, and trying to break through a culture that is not natural to challenge the senior leader. So sort of much more deference, whether you think that's true or not. That's sort of a bit more of the culture. And again, changing today. But he said that his secret was the first time anybody did even an inkling of a challenge, he had to leap up out of his seat, go over, congratulate that person, shake their hand, make a big deal out of that's exactly what I'm wanting, and kind of really a big show of how wonderful this behavior was.
Yeah.
And what he did is exaggerated to what we would normally think.
Right.
But if you've got a culture where it's just not the norm, or there's fear of doing it, or even you haven't done it in the past, exaggerating is probably not a bad strategy.
Yeah, it's probably worked really well for him because then it makes people comfortable to say, wait a minute, I want someone to come up and shake my hand and hug me or whatever it is that's happening in that situation. And I think when you're a leader and somebody speaks up that doesn't normally speak up, thank them for that. Like outwardly, like, oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you for giving me your feedback, or thanks for adding to the conversation. We value what you have to say. I mean, you can even bring it, you can be that kind of person, maybe not leaping up and, shaking hands and all the things, but I do think, that makes people feel wanted, and they want to be a part of something, and they want to continue to add to the conversation.
Right. Right. Well, and we all have seen cases where the leader thinks that an individual on the team is not a strong contributor. And so what they say is usually off base and not quite so relevant, and maybe a little more complaining than is really relevant. And the leader's like, here we go again, eye rolling or some version of that one. The problem with that is everybody around the table sees that reaction.
Yes.
And they don't want to risk being that person.
Right. Right.
Even if they're not, they don't want to risk it. So it's a hard one.
It is a hard one. But I think there's also that unspoken, like we all kind of maybe know, right, that person is the one that we're all rolling our eyes at. So as a leader, I think it's your responsibility to give them feedback as well. Probably more in a one-on-one setting, not really in the, but in a one-on-one to say, hey, we value what you're saying. However, you come across as being either negative or not having a solution or venting, like, I would really recommend that you come next time a little bit differently and show up differently. That will only help the person a lot better. It being kind of the unspoken truth of
True. And I also think there's power in testing whatever idea you want to say with a peer that you trust, because that helps you refine what you want to say. You know that there's at least one other person in the room who's kind of understands what you're talking about, and that can add more voice to it as well. I want to do one last piece of advice, and I want your reaction to this one. I often tell people who are on the quieter side, they will say, yeah, I was ready to say something and somebody else said it. And I often say it again.
Yeah.
Because there's a signal in your saying it that you agree. Now, don't take all day to repeat everything that was said, but just saying that's exactly what I see adds more weight to the other person, and it helps the leader understand, oh, we are all in agreement. Otherwise, I'm sitting there wondering, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you said yay or nay? Are you engaged or not engaged? Reactions to that?
I agree with you on that 100%. And not just to agree with you because of what you said. But again, I think also you're building an alliance with that person at that moment in time, right? And so you're starting to build some relationship. If you hadn't had it before, maybe you do. But I do agree. People want to hear your voice, even if it is, I agree. And if you have, you agree with everything they said, great. Do you have anything else that you can add to as to why you agree to that, right? We want to hear, again, you're in the room for a reason. We want to hear what you have to say. Don't leave us guessing. So I do agree with that as well.
Yeah, I often say to people, we have too many meetings and too many people in meetings. So if you don't want to hear somebody's opinion, then don't invite them to the meeting. Exactly. And therefore, if you're in the meeting, your opinion matters.
It's funny though, because there's so many companies though that just have this culture of everybody has to be in every single meeting. And I mean, this is probably a whole nother podcast, and we'll put this on the back burner for another. But like, how do you get a meeting where you just have the right people in the meeting, not and being comfortable if you're not in that meeting, that it's going to be okay without you too. Yeah. So that's there's a lot of interesting dynamics there. We won't go down that road, but I think
there's a lot there.
Yeah.
And one of them, I'll just give my pet peeve: publish meeting minutes. Half the people are only there to know what happened. Publish the minutes. They don't need to be there. Okay, let's not go that, because we're talking about the other topics around speaking up. Yeah. All right, now I want to go to a related topic, because when I can get people speak up, then I can really start to move towards what I know is fundamentally your passion, and that's about alignment. So, talk to me about what it takes to get alignment. Let's take a case, let's say a project team, or pick any other one you want. What's not working, and what do we really do to solve this alignment problem?
Yeah. So I'm in the middle of an alignment problem right now, and so we're still working on it. So it hasn't been fully solved. So not everything's going to be beautiful butterflies and whatever. But it's a same company, one of the same companies I've been working with. Again, we've got product, business, technology, ops. I kind of work in this little space here, and the dynamics of it are interesting because I've got two leaders that are brand new. I've got two that have been there a while. And so we're having to deal a little bit with, like, some are trying to find their space and find their way and make a name for themselves. The other two are really trying to figure out how do we work better together. And so we came together for 2 days to get alignment on terminologies and roles and how are we going to work together and how do we build the right teams together. And I will say that meeting went okay. It didn't go great. And I'm just going to be very frank with you because everybody kind of had a different agenda for it. And like I said, you've got a couple folks that are trying to find their way and others are not. So what we're doing now is we are coming together consistently, probably every week, talking about the tough topics, making sure that we all say the same things, that we are agreeing on stuff. And we're going to talk about that in a minute here. But, we bring up the tough topics and we continue to keep it going. Because if we don't, it's just going to fall. It's just going to go by the wayside. We're never going to all ever come together. People are going to say, I didn't agree to that, or I wasn't a part of that conversation. And so it takes work. It's going to continue to take effort. And it's, it is making sure that everybody understands kind of, this is where I want to take my area. This is where I'm trying to take my area. Now, how do we actually do it together? Because we're gonna be more successful if we do work together than if you have your own plan and I have my own plan, and then all of a sudden we're kind of all on different sides of where we're trying to go with it.
All right, you just touched on what I see as one of the biggest challenges in any teamwork, particularly larger in the organization, even lower in the organization. The area that I belong to has an agenda that it is trying to achieve. It has metrics that it's trying to hit. It has goals that it's trying to hit. And for good reason. I'm not saying, go change those metrics, because sometimes that's what you need. Like, I need manufacturing to be really focused on 0 defects. Please, thank you. That means engineering, no, I can't add a change. And engineering is going to be rewarded on new, next, inventive, new technology. So the metrics exist, and where we're trying to take each of our individual areas can be in polar opposite directions.
Yeah, usually it is.
And that's a reality.
Yeah.
Okay, now how do we move from that reality to where we're actually willing to collaborate on something that is maybe inconsistent? Partially inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, what I always like to do is I think you have to explain what it is that you're being charged with. My area is being charged for 0 defects, and let your peers know that, so that they understand, okay, this person isn't just being difficult because they're not saying no defects. Like they truly are being charged and they're being measured for 0 defects, or they're being charged for new innovation. And so when you can bring that up to your peers and have the conversation, and everybody can understand, like, oh, maybe that must make sense why you're actually pushing back and saying absolutely not, no new changes, no innovation, right? We got to have that shared understanding as to, like, what it is that we're all trying to accomplish, and then how do we accomplish our individual areas as well as accomplish the company goals. And a lot of times people will say, well, that's for the leaders to figure out. I'm not going to do that. Well, actually, the leaders are wanting that next layer or layers within the trenches to figure out, how do you work better together? How do you make this happen? Because we've all have a mission here, and we need to be on the same page in order to get something accomplished. And so I think it's awareness and conversation and collaboration, and there might even be some very heated discussion to say, well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree that we're doing 0 defects. It's not possible. Okay. Well, then, how do we help each other? And I think at the end of the day, if we as leaders come to say, now, how do we help each other? How do I help you? How do you help me? Let me give you feedback on things I need from you. You give me feedback on what you need from me. We're going to have a much richer and a better place to work together, right? Because, I don't want to wake up every day and be fighting with somebody because we don't understand, and I hate to say fighting, but be in a disagreement with each other because we don't understand what a person's goals are versus what my goals are. And if we can literally have that open conversation, that's what I'm about is let's just have open conversations and talk about what are you trying to accomplish? What am I trying to accomplish? Now, how do we do it together? And that's literally will be so much easier.
I remember working with a team a number of years ago where one of the team members said of the work we were doing, finally said, my boss has said that absolutely no way can I help this thing that we're talking about go forward because it's counter to what my boss is trying to achieve. The fact that I could get that individual to say that meant that it was possible now to work with it. But, you don't want to encourage all bosses to say it. Sometimes it's real. Sometimes that's a little bit self-serving. But this notion of naming your reality, owning it, claiming it, having an open conversation about it, everybody doing the same, seems to me to be a really critical component of getting alignment. Okay, I want to go to the next one you said. We're doing this because there's a company goal. Right. Frequently, I find that goal is not terribly compelling.
Right.
Right. I know why the CEO wants this goal because that's his or her paycheck at the end of the day, or that's the board's mandate, or that's a customer mandate. I'm not sure why that's important to me. So that compelling mission, goal, purpose, outcome, how essential is that to getting a team to truly align?
I actually think it's probably the most critical thing because a lot of times we don't know what we're working towards. And, we do that whole like, what's in it for me, right? But if I can understand why I'm working on something and what it's going to do to achieve the goal, the mission, the initiative, or whatever for the company, I'm much more likely to actually want to be a part of it than just go do it because I told you to. And so as leaders, I believe it is our duty to say, this is what this is the goal, this is the initiative, this is the strategy, the outcome that we're trying to achieve. This is why. And it might be for the CEO's paycheck. Okay, that's maybe the reality of what we're working towards, right? However, hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's for the customers and for the company and what, and to be able to achieve and to get better at what we're doing. But I, as an individual contributor, even as a leader, I want to know that what I'm working on is important and it adds value. And that's when I'm going to have the better collaboration. And hopefully people will work better together because we're all on the same page,
headed in the same direction. Well, also that being specific about what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it gives me as an individual doing the work a little bit of leverage in shifting the how. So a bit of a compromise with a peer who's got a different agenda.
Right.
The more I understand of the what and the why, the more I know where a compromise might be acceptable or might not. I would be willing to propose it, put it forward. Okay. All right. So we have this notion that you have to name what your current reality is. You have to own it. We have to have an open conversation. We have to have an intention to help each other. We need to have a mission, a goal, an outcome that we understand what it is and why we're trying to do it. Okay. The other thing that I think gets in the way, and I want to test with you, is expertise.
Yes.
Because people come to things like that, activities like this big team, thinking I have the answer. And I have the answer based on my expertise. We should just do X, Y, and Z. Or the polar opposite. We can never do X, Y, and Z because I've seen it fail before.
Right.
That certainty, in my mind, makes it impossible to find solutions. What's your reaction to what I just said?
I've seen that, right? Especially how that person shows up. So if you do have an expert in the room and they are the loudest or most matter of fact person in the room, it can stop any creativity and any innovation because okay, that's the person, that's de facto standard, that's it, right? And sometimes that's the case, but I also think it, like I said, it can stifle creativity and innovation in conversation. So if you are the expert and you know that you're the expert, you usually know why you're in the room, right? Like, how can you maybe pause, maybe be the last one to speak? Again, this is some more like self-reflection and self 360, and let others, because you may not have all the answers, right? Things change so rapidly. And sometimes there's other ways or better ways of doing things that might even come from this junior team member that we're talking about, or somebody else that maybe doesn't even have the expertise, but sees it from a very different perspective. A lot of times I kind of ask dumb questions, even if I think I'm the expert. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but I'll ask a dumb question just to be like, hey, like the most obvious basic thing. But, oh, I'm so glad you said that. I would, because I was thinking that. So I think, as an expert, you kind of maybe need to also temper yourself and figure out, like, how do I make sure everybody's voice gets heard before I go and espouse poetic about whatever it is we're talking about.
Right. I find if I can get these expert leaders to entertain the possibility that they have a piece of truth, but only a piece, and that there's a bunch of other component parts that they might not know, and including a solution that none of us know. So it's like embracing that I don't know it all, to steal a title from my book, is kind of like essential. But that is hard to do with an expert leader who's short on time, who's got a strong opinion, who's had a bunch of experience, pro and con in the past. It's hard to embrace that I might not know.
It is hard. It's hard. And I think that, potentially as a junior person, like, it's hard to have that conversation too, because they're known and they're awarded for their expertise. And so sometimes some humble feedback might be like, yeah, and how do you, temper yourself for a little bit?
Okay. All right. So is there anything else? So we've talked about being able to talk about the reality that I'm in and being able to be open about that and to give feedback to each other about what I need and what you need. There's the goal itself and the what and the why. There's the expertise, entertaining, not knowing. Is there anything else that's relevant for this alignment?
I feel like, so the one thing that when I'm coaching a group of leaders and we're kicking off a session, I actually tell them alignment does not always equal agreement. And that becomes a very interesting pause for a moment in the room. And the reason is, if we have to agree on everything, we're never gonna move forward, right? And so how do we get to a place where we can support wherever it is that we're trying to go? And that becomes our alignment. And that we figure out, okay, I may not fully agree with it, but I'll get behind it and we'll continue forward, right? And so obviously, if you completely do not agree with something, speak up and say, I don't agree with it. But if you're at a point like, am I really going to die over this one? No, probably not. Okay, I'm going to align on this. And then if you do align on it, don't go out of the room and say, yeah, but I didn't really agree with that, right? So I think that's my one little nugget of alignment does not always have to equal agreement. And we need to get to a place that we continue to move the conversation forward. I
can imagine someone is saying, I don't agree, but I'm willing to go with these first two steps until we get some data that it's either right or not right. So you sort of can reserve that opportunity to revisit whether this is a good direction or not direction. So how do you then, as a leader, so let's say your team knows that you fought really hard not to do something, and you've been very vocal with them about what and why, and they've given you data to support it and so on, and you've come out of the large alignment meeting and said, okay, we're going to do that thing that I fought against. Now, how do I go back to my team with authenticity and say, yeah, we're going to do it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's about being honest and transparent with them to say, we got to a point where we had to get into alignment. Here's the reason and here's the facts of why this decision was made. I may not agree 100%, but I'm going to agree with it for now. And this is what we're going to do to put in place, right? And so it's transparency. And we don't always get our way. Like that's part of human nature, right? And so I think if you can be transparent with your team and not just whatever, either badmouth another team member or whatever, but this is the conversation, to as much as you can divulge, because sometimes you can, but this is the conversations, this is the decisions that were made, this is why we as a leadership team are going to head in this direction. At that point, you've said, and I fought, but then we got to this place and this is what we're going to do. So let's get behind it and let's do it. That makes you a really good leader, right? Because you're giving them the facts, you're giving them, what's going on. You did try your best to fight for it, but guess what? Sometimes, you don't get your way, and the other leadership team says we're going to do this, and we're going to do it, and then we are going to do it. We're not going to fight against it.
Right, we're going to fight against it. Yeah, I love that notion of the transparency, where I'm going to say to the team, that this wasn't my primary choice, but I've agreed to it for the following 3 reasons.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm clear why I agreed, but I'm also honest that it wasn't my preference. But here's the reason, the rationale behind it, and then we get behind it and actually execute. I love it, Betsy. Okay, so I want to give you a couple minutes because I know you run this thing called the Alignment Lab.
Yes.
And I kind of want the 1 or 2 minute pitch on why somebody should come and work with you, because we've talked about the idea of alignment, but we haven't talked about how you go about creating alignment. So give me the pitch.
Yeah, so it's funny, the Alignment Lab came out of, we were doing just the same kind of work with lots of different companies and lots of different leaders. So we'd come in, somebody would say, hey, can you coach this one leader one-on-one? Okay, great. We kind of start to have the conversation and we talk about the one-on-one leadership. But then as we're having the conversation, trying to understand it, they said, well, actually, can you coach this entire team one-on-one?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, of course. So then we do one-on-one coaching. We do 360 feedback. It's an interview-based feedback survey. So we aren't just sending out on a scale of 1 to 5, this is what we think of this person. We're asking good questions. We're getting good feedback. We want to hear, but it's anonymous. Mm-hmm. And then we take that feedback. They get the results. The second part of it is actually doing team development and strategy workshops. So we come together every quarter. So we're coaching that group of leaders one-on-one, but then we're also coaching together as a team. And so we're taking some of the nuances that we're hearing in our one-on-one sessions, not the confidential stuff, but the themes that we're thinking, like, okay, we can't make decisions, or we're afraid to bring up what's really happening in the room. We bring those to our quarterly offsites and we pick through those as team development. And we also help and work teams to get a strategy and to stay accountable to a strategy and to get alignment as a team. So it becomes this like personal and professional one-on-one development as well as team development. And we kept going into companies like this. We kept coming in as a one-on-one coach and then literally moving into strategy work and team development every quarter. And so we said, okay, we're going to pull it together and we're going to make it a formal offering, because it was just something that we felt, one, made sense. And we've been able to help several leadership teams grow together and become much more high performing as a leadership team. So that's it. Hopefully that was
Sounds
not
good.
3 minutes.
That was perfect. That was perfect. And last question for you is, if somebody wants to find you, where's the best place to reach you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Betsy Kauffman, or you can find me at my website, crossimpact.co. I've actually got a leadership survey, an alignment survey, a really quick 10-question survey out there that's for free, crossimpact.co/alignment. Take it. I'd be curious as to where you land with results on if you're aligned, what do you think, where are we going as a team?
Great. I love it, Betsy. Betsy Kauffman, and crossimpact.co/alignment if you want the free survey. Betsy, what a great conversation. What an important topic. Speaking up and alignment. And I think we did that as sort of as two halves, but they actually fit hand in glove. Because it's rather hard to get alignment if I can't get speaking up. And if I can't get speaking up, I'm not going to get alignment. So there we go.
There we go.
Thanks for being here, Betsy.
Thanks, Wanda. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Join us next week for another conversation about getting out of your comfort zone. And if you want to watch this one, check out our YouTube channel on Out of the Comfort Pod. We also have some shorts there and some extra tips that you might find interesting. And send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Outofthecomfortzone.com. Until next week, so long.